Hello and welcome to your July 2024 astrology forecast. I'm your host, Laura Chung. I am a Western tropical whole sign astrologer. I am the author of the book, How to Manifest. I am an astrologer. I am a writer. I am a forever student of the mysteries of the universe. So, before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you who have emailed me and direct messaged me. This morning, I received a DM from Claire. And first of all, thank you for listening and thank you for taking the time to write me a message. And I read all of your reviews on Spotify and Apple. I just am so grateful that what I'm putting out there is resonating with you and landing with you and for taking the time, because time, which we're going to talk a lot about this month, is a very valuable and expensive resource. And you can be listening to so many other astrologers and podcasts. And I'm just so humbled and so grateful that what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling is resonating with all of you. I started doing this kind of astrology last year and really started to put it out there on social media and on my podcast. And definitely at first it was scary because saying certain words are suppressed by the algorithms and your platform can get banned and suspended and restricted. But I ultimately believe that my purpose is to integrate all of the disciplines and schools of thoughts that I've learned from combining my degree in psychology, my knowledge of astrology, my own embodied experience here on Earth and in the US, and all of the training I've done in healing and Reiki and somatic abolitionism, that I do believe my purpose is to help people to remember who they are and help them change internally so that all of you are reminded of your role in collective liberation. And it's just honestly, like, it just reminds me that I'm on my purpose and I'm on the right path when I see comments like that. And it's just so like, it's exactly what I needed to hear this morning as I was researching for the month of July. And I I come from a place of, there is light and dark, and there is duality, and there's multidimensionality, and there's so much beauty in this world. And yet we are in this timeline right now, thrust into this massive awakening and change that I truly believe we have the power within each and every one of us and collectively to be that change, to be the doulas and the midwives of this new earth, this new paradigm, this new way of being. And I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for a lot of the challenges and obstacles I leaned into in my life. And I truly believe that it is these dark times that is the fertile ground for a birth and awakening. And I really do believe in cycles, and nature will always forever be my muse, because when I just observe nature and just the way that there is a life and death cycle, it really does remind me that as we witness the collapse of empire and all the the cacophony of fuckery that's going on right now, it is because it's dying. And if you listen to my Pluto and Aquarius episode, I talked a lot about the USA's Pluto return and how it's every 250-ish years when a nation's Pluto returns. like a solar return, like a birthday, and the US is at 248. And so we are approaching and we are in it. I wouldn't even say approaching, I would say we are in it. And, you know, the Pluto cycle is every 250 years. So 2026 would be the exact 250-year mark. So I do believe we're in an important part and timeline of history, and we get to be alive and witness the beginning of something massive. And I think we can all feel it. And it's no coincidence that in 2026, all of the outer planets will have switched signs. And I'm just going to keep repeating it over and over again so that we all are prepared. And if you've been paying any attention at all, you know that we're in trouble and nobody is going to save us. No leader, no president. It's very much a Pluto and Aquarius kind of thing. Like, we will save us, we the people. It's written in our Constitution. And I don't mean to say this in a fear-mongering way, but just to be really embodied in the reality of what is, but also preparing ourselves for what's to come. Because if you know that a hurricane is coming, if you know that a storm is coming, you take the necessary steps to prepare. Like, I was living in New York City when Hurricane Sandy was in like New York City and the tri-state area. And, you know, hurricanes are not common in the Northeast, but, you know, you research what you do to prepare for a hurricane. I was home alone in my apartment in New York City, and I taped the windows. I did all the things you're supposed to do, like get extra food, get candles. And so I believe it's important for all of us to be real and to not bypass and not disassociate, but to really prepare ourselves for what's to come and to do what we need to do and do what is in our control. I mean, if you watch the presidential debate, it was like in the background of my home while I was doing something else, and also the draconian laws that Congress they're passing right now. This shouldn't be a shock to most Americans, US Americans. I think everybody awakens at different times based on the level of privilege or identities of privilege that they have. But this is not a shock. Like, if you've been paying attention, when an empire is losing its power, it doubles down and becomes fascist and tries to control the people through censorship, through regulating women's bodies, and all of these dystopian fiction novels like The Handmaid's Tale are coming true. So again, like, this is not to fearmonger. This is not to say we're all fucked. We might as well just like give up, because I don't believe in that at all. I actually believe just thinking that we're all fucked and that we shouldn't care is the opposite of why we're here. I believe that each of us has a unique gift, a unique essence. We have skills and talents that nobody else has. And it's our responsibility to take ownership of that and awaken those things within us. It's like each of us has a seed, and maybe my seed is a lime tree and your seed is an avocado tree. We're different trees, but we have to nourish and understand our own seeds. You know, I speak in metaphor and analogy. I have a Mercury in Pisces. So I use astrology, if you didn't know, as a liberatory tool, first to help you liberate yourself, because you have a unique, I call it a soul print, kind of like a fingerprint or a blueprint. And you were born at a very specific time. I believe our soul chose our birth times and the way in which we come into this world. And so, like, we start to decolonize and liberate ourselves from what society tells us that we have to be. which is very limiting. Not all of us are meant to be career driven or mothers or fathers or going to college. We're all multidimensional beings and we're just meant to honor who we are. And that's way easier said than done. So I use astrology as a way to look at your unique signature and help you liberate yourself and honor yourself and how unique you are. Because again, we all have a unique role in collective liberation. And I've learned the hard way through the last like 9 months that you cannot go against your own energy. You have to honor your energy and your own skill sets. It's like if you've ever been surfing, it's so easy to ride the wave in, go with the flow, go with the wave, but it's way harder to paddle against the wave. I mean, that takes a lot of energy and time. So like your natal chart or your soul print, you can't help who you are. It is there's only so much you can run away from yourself, right? And there are seasons and transits that push you out of your comfort zone so that you can grow. And so, like, let's say, for example, fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. You're fixed, so you're meant to hold the energy, but there are going to be seasons in your life or transits that are going to force you to change and get a little bit outside of your comfort zone so that you can grow into the beautiful person that you always were inside. And again, I always use nature as a muse, and you can think about like the crab or a lobster. They have to leave their home, they have to leave their shells so that they can find one that fits their new form. But all of that change is initiated internally, which is Cancer season. So before we get started on July, I always like to do a little recap of June. And just because that's the whole point of transits to me, it's like I have a journal, I have an astrology planner. I say this every month and I write down the dates. But more importantly, I just notice how I feel. I notice what's going through my mind, and I just notice and observe, kind of like taking field notes of like what these transits really are asking of me and what these transits offer me in terms of my own growth. So there were just some really significant things that happened in June for me personally that I want to share. Part of my journey here is also to share more of my story because I'm a pretty private person. I don't necessarily share my private life, like who I'm dating or or things that are happening, because I don't know, I'm just really private and I like to deal with those things behind closed doors. But now I'm trying to come back into why that's important, because I do believe when you're vulnerable and you share your story, it gives other people the permission. And I do take my role as somebody who has a platform very seriously. And I do believe in my upbringing and culture, my ancestors are from Korea, that silence and suffering in silence is something that I want to break the cycle of. So I'm going to share a little bit of my personal experiences with these transits. And I would say June, obviously we had those Gemini stelliums. And June, we went from Gemini, which is a mutable air sign, to Cancer, which is a cardinal water sign. So Gemini season is a really good season to like network. I think I mentioned that in the June forecast last month. It's just a really good season to network, to gather information, to be curious, to ask a lot of questions. And I very much did that. And I just think, every season builds upon each other, right? So before Gemini is Taurus, and we're just like planting seeds and we're becoming embodied and we're realizing our worth. And so then we go to Gemini season and it's like asking for what you deserve and what you need in order for you to sustain your life, like the resources you need. And so there was on June 4th, I just remember this very clearly because I was looking out for this date. On June 4th, there was a Venus cazimi at 14 degrees of Gemini. Mercury in Gemini was trine to Pluto in Aquarius, and Mercury in Gemini was conjunct Jupiter. And that was the day I asked for a raise at the organization I was working for. And it's very on brand with like all of the planets that were involved. And Gemini represents my seventh house of one-on-one partnerships, and not just romantic, but of all kinds, right? Business, platonic, one-on-one relationships. So out of all the days, I thought this would be a great day because, you know, Venus cazimi. Venus is the planet about money, worth, relationships. It was being renewed in the heart of the sun. Mercury is also a planet about communication, and it was in its home sign, its domicile in Gemini, and it also rules contracts in my seventh house of partnerships. And Jupiter, which is about expansion and freedom, and Mercury trine Pluto, which is all about like really powerful connections and contracts. Well, this is why I'm bringing this up, because sometimes the thing that you ask for, so when we're talking about manifestation and we're asking for something like more elevated, I don't even want to say more because more isn't necessarily better, but something that reflects all the work that you've done internally. So I was asking for more money from the universe in general. And so the organization I was working with, I asked them for a raise because I was just, you know, I felt like it was time. And you know, if it's out of alignment, then that thing is going to leave, so that the universe creates space so that the actual thing you're asking for comes in. So long story short, not long story, the organization that I was working for is being defunded. Like, they don't have enough money. They couldn't give me a raise. So we decided not to continue with my contract. So essentially, I stopped working with the organization in the month of June. Now, like, my spirit said, wow, this is like a really great sign because I'm asking for more. They can't give me more. That's out of alignment. So something bigger, something that's more meant for my vibration is coming in. But my human side, my ego was freaking out because it happened kind of suddenly. And, you know, Gemini energy is fast, Mercury is fast. So my ego was like, oh, I'm being rejected. And I didn't, not only did I ask for more, but now I don't have a job. Now I don't have like the income coming in that I had before. And then all of these shadow feelings started coming up in terms of like feelings of rejection, feeling of scarcity, and poverty consciousness. All the things that I had worked on were starting to surface. And my spirit realized, wow, like I still have these latent shadows that I need to take a look at, but I can't really do that now if I'm like freaking out. I need to like settle my nervous system. I need to take a little break. I need to like sit with all of the things that were happening. And to be honest, I just needed a break to heal my mind and my body because my mental health was so fragile and broken. And so I knew that I needed to allow the dust to settle for me to fully feel embodied again. And I think I also mentioned in the June episode about Jupiter and Gemini, the last time Jupiter was in Gemini for me personally was when I went through my breakup. And Jupiter does that because Jupiter is the planet of expansion and freedom. And when you again ask for something that's more expansive and more, when you want to be more free, it also means that something might be being let go of. And I don't know if I said this on the podcast or if I said this in a TikTok, but I found that the couple of days before, like, so it's this astrological term called combust. So before Venus or Mercury are in a cazimi, so before the planet goes to the heart of the sun to be renewed, Venus and Mercury go through kind of a death period because it's being burned away by the sun. And my friend Tasha Begg, who is an evolutionary astrologer, reminded me that everything in life has to go through a death before it goes through a rebirth. Like before a new moon, it goes, like, the light starts to get less and less and less. And if you think about what a new moon is, it's dark, there's no moon. And so with every birth, you have to have something that dies away. And so metaphorically, a part of myself was dying away, the old parts of me that was kind of accepting less than what I should have been being paid, and less than what I deserve. And so that thing had to be removed. Again, when you are doing the manifestation, and I know a lot of people don't like that word because it's been co-opted by New Age spirituality, but I'm trying to reclaim this word for us. If that word doesn't resonate with you right now, you can use co-create. When we're co-creating something, someone that we desire, that we believe we want because we notice the lack of it, so many things in our life ultimately will be cleared, will die away. And there's this like mourning period, because I was mourning a path that I thought I was going down, and then mourning a path that I kind of ignored. Like all of this stuff that happened so quickly since October, that I really had to just take a break, honestly, which is what I've been doing. I've just been sitting with and allowing myself to digest everything that's been happening, giving myself some time. But I just wanted to bring that example up because, again, there's no such thing as good or bad. There's no such thing as, like, in astrology, especially, like when we talk about planets that are benefic, like Venus and Jupiter, because this day had both Venus and Jupiter. So you would think that I would have gotten the raise, or you would think that I would have gotten this like huge opportunity. But what in fact happened was that thing had to leave. And then when that thing leaves and there's like a blank slate and it's clear, you have to be okay and comfortable in the uncomfortable part of the pause and the void and the emptiness, because in the void and the emptiness is the unknown, which is why people get so scared. And that, I believe, is the most difficult part of manifestation, is when you don't see it yet and you start freaking out, because we live in a material world. And then you have to remind yourself of your divinity, of your spiritualness, that everything that you need is actually inside. And that's why Cancer season is so important. All seasons are important, but Cancer season overcorrects Gemini season in like that outward sociability, the networking, to then come back into yourself and remind yourself that you are a sacred being and that you need to protect that inner child, that inner being, and to remember that everything comes from within, and to fine tune your vibration. So obviously after that, the 2 days after that was the new moon in Gemini. And that is when I started saying to myself, okay, this was meant to happen. The universe is redirecting me. Rejection is redirection, even though, my inner child felt like wounded. But I had to just like remind myself that this is actually what I asked for. I asked for more money. I asked for more peace. I asked for more ease. And yeah, so that happened. And then, the solstice was June 20th, and the day after was the full moon in Capricorn. And in July, we're going to have another full moon in Capricorn. And then August, we're going to have a full moon in Aquarius. And there are three full moons in the sign of Saturn. So we're really being asked to understand the lessons of Saturn. And Saturn is so prominent right now, especially since Saturn just went retrograde in the sign of Pisces, which we'll talk more about in July. But I just thought that solstice was so pivotal for so much, because really what solstice is like it's standing still. And now we're literally like changing, because the sun is now decreasing in light, and it's like metaphorically and like physically the sun is changing. So I don't know. I really did feel collectively, and I noticed with people around me and just talking to people, that a lot of people feel the sense of urgency to change. And change is so uncomfortable because it makes you sit with so much that you don't want to feel, and that not allowing yourself to feel, and not giving yourself the space and time to feel, and being honest with your feelings. And so I just pray that everybody here listening to this has a safe space, has people around them that they can share their feelings with, that they can talk to. If you have a therapist, if you have like a group or community. Me personally, I have a lot of feelings and I need to talk about them. I have an Aquarius moon. So like sometimes I talk about them, but then I don't actually feel them until I'm talking about them. But it really helps me to speak about what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking, because it helps me to process, and it helps me to process like this very interesting place we are in our collective consciousness. Because like I feel like so many people are more aware, and maybe I'm projecting because people have always been aware, but I feel like we're just super aware because of technology and social media. Age of Aquarius. So because I've had some time to like just be, which is a frightening thing, I decided to take the rest of June and July, like quote unquote, off, not intentionally working. And I mean working for like money. And I'm really privileged to have like, um, like resources and community and family to help me. And also I've saved some money. So like I have the privilege to take this time off. But I know a lot of people don't. Like when you don't have a job, you need to find another job. So I've been taking this pause very seriously, and just allowing myself for the first time, I think, ever in my life. I thought I was taking a pause like years ago, but I realized like how frenetic and scared I was. And I'm not scared now, because I just know that in order for us to usher in this new paradigm, this new earth, we have to be the change first within. So if I'm telling my clients, if I'm telling people, if I'm writing on my Instagram posts, like we need to take the time to be intentional. And if I'm not doing that, that just is like, no, like that's not living in integrity with who I am. Like I do what I say, and I say what I do. So I'm being very intentional with my time by sitting with what is, and then allowing what needs to come out to emerge, not from a place of scarcity, not from a place of poverty consciousness, not from a place of repeating cycles of wounding, but from a real aligned place of I want to I want to be, this is going to sound so cheesy. I'm an Aries, so a place of unconditional love and remember why we're here, like rooted in love. And the thing is like I really do believe we're all going to have to understand energy and how energy works and transmuting energy so that we can change internally. I really do believe that the the currency we're all going to have to understand is energy and attention. And so I have to be that first. And the reason why, what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in the Sudan and Congo, all of that is just a manifestation of centuries of colonization and repeated cycles of trauma and violence, because colonialism is violence. It's violent. It's violent towards the earth. It's violent towards the people. It's violent towards the feminine. Really, I mean, earth is a feminine thing, right? So when you pillage and rape the earth, you pillage and rape the women, the children, and it's just not a reality based on life and centering life and the most vulnerable. So all of us, no matter who your ancestors are, what your skin tone is, where you're from, like we all have to decolonize and we all have to heal our ancestral trauma. Especially, I mean, I don't want to say especially, but including white European people. So, like, we all have to do this work. The work looks different for each of us, but we all have to do it. And I think it really starts there because we all have to come from a rooted place, rooted back to earth and the wisdom that this earth um has. And that's really like what the lesson of Pluto and Capricorn was asking of us. And that's why I believe these full moon in Capricorn, the one in July is at 29 degrees. We're going to talk more about that. And then the full moon in Aquarius and Pluto re-entering the sign of Capricorn at the 29th anaretic degree in September. We're really closing out this chapter. And not that you're going to be too late, because I don't even believe in time. And, Saturn being in the sign of Pisces, which is a mutable water sign, is like, what is reality? What is time? But I do believe if you have an inkling that you're being called to do any kind of healing, ancestral healing, or decolonization, the time is now, basically. So, with that being said, I think just having this time to just really root back into what my purpose is, why I'm here, and how can I best serve the collective. I started remembering Anthony Bourdain, and his birthday was June 25th. He's my favorite Cancer, and really studying his natal chart. And there's so many good nuggets in there. So I just know him really well, not like personally, even though I met him in 2012. I know his like dates because he has a book. He has multiple shows, and there's a lot of like resources out there that talk about him and specific dates. So I was just like researching his chart and like certain things in his astrological chart. And I think I'm going to start a new series called Pain and Purpose, because I do believe it's where we have our pain, like the wound, Chiron, the wounded healer, and parts of our experience and our life where we find the most painful to be our purpose. It really is very Plutonian. And Anthony Bourdain had his Pluto in his first house. And I do believe the things that he struggled with was obviously addiction, but loneliness. And he tried to channel that energy in a way where he was using food, Cancer, as a medium to humanize people all over the world. And his sun is in the 12th house of like marginalized people who are not seen by, people who aren't seen, people who are being silenced. And his episode on Palestine is like going viral now. And it's just so beautiful how you can use art and storytelling to help humanize people, but also to bring people awareness. And it really reminded me of why I was inspired by him. And, in 20, when was it? 2010, 20 2009 to 2010 was when I took photography classes and I started traveling the world. And I started my blog in 2012, which was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini. And I just like was so inspired by him and being able to have the privilege to even travel and get to see these parts of the world that not a lot of people got to see. And I don't know, it just reminded me of the things that I love to do and the things that really inspired me that I kind of forgot because, you have to get a real job, you have to pay the bills. But now I'm like trying to integrate some of that into my own work. And so TBD, I'll let you know like what comes out of that. But I just wanted to share some of the things that were happening during Gemini season and then to Cancer season that were like kind of percolating and things that I was thinking about. And then on June 29th, so I'm recording this on Sunday, June 30th. So this was yesterday. Saturn went retrograde in the sign of Pisces. And there's so much I can say about Saturn and Pisces because I've been thinking about this a lot. But one major thing that I wanted to say is whatever we have inherited, so whether it's trauma, whether it's privilege, whether it's being white in America, it's not necessarily our fault. Like we didn't ask, see, I believe that we did ask to be born, but it's not our fault that we inherited these things, but it's our responsibility now for it. So Saturn significations are discipline, responsibility, and maturation. And so at a macro level, if our ancestors were oppressed or were the oppressors, it's not necessarily our fault, but what are you doing about that now? How are you becoming the change and the cycle breaker? The same thing as privilege. Privilege, there's, intersectionality. So as a able-bodied cis hetero Asian woman living in the United States in the coastal elite, I have a lot of privilege. And then there's also parts of my identity being an Asian woman that are oppressed. So it's like, how am I using the privileged parts of myself to bring more awareness to the disadvantaged and to the marginalized, while also healing the oppressed side of me, knowing that I have all the power within and not like assimilating to whiteness or aligning myself to whiteness and Eurocentric beauty standards. There's like this interesting, I don't want to say like it's not a game, but it's like introspection. It's really like looking at your identities, not because it's your fault, again, because these are things that we've inherited, but just to look with discernment, what are you doing about that now? Because we don't want to cause more harm to others. And I always say, like, my intention is to always have a safe space, but it's not going to be safe for everybody because I come from a very specific perspective. Like I said, I'm an able-bodied cis hetero woman who grew up in New York with a certain level of privilege. So sometimes what I might say might offend somebody who's maybe a trans woman or a disabled non-binary person. And so I really like try to also be open to criticism and when people call me out, basically, because those privileges that I have or the identities that I have make me blind to certain things. So I do believe Saturn retrograde also asks us, like, what are you taking responsibility for? What are you like kind of getting real about, So that's pretty much June. I'm sure there were so many news stories that happened, and there were so many things happening collectively. But I was really just trying to focus on my healing and just to try to get in a more centered space, because May, I was like not in a good headspace. I was not in a good headspace. So I'm also glad that I have more space and time to prepare for these forecasts and for the future episodes of this podcast, because they don't feel rushed, and I can take my time in reflection and research. So that is what you can be expecting more of. Okay, so I guess without further ado, let's talk about July. So, July obviously will still be in Cancer season, which is a cardinal water sign. And that's all about going within, protecting what is sacred, protecting your inner child. A lot of childhood memories might have come up because water holds memories, but also the Cancer archetype is the mother, the family. You might have f- felt called to reparent yourself or reparent some of the parts of yourself. Um, so the good news is that if you have water sign placements, you'll have all these beautiful trines. But if you have fire and air sign placements like me, it's gonna feel a little challenging, because water, when you throw water on fire, you kind of feel like all of your life force energy is out. If you have cardinal sign placements like Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, you'll have squares. So you're going to come up with a little bit of a conflict, 90-degree conflict. Squares are 90 degrees, but they are activating you to change something internally. And then in mid-July, we'll enter Leo season. So fire signs will have trines, yay. And fixed signs will also, so the fixed signs will experience the squares. So the fixed signs again are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So you might feel challenged a little bit to get outside of your comfort zone and to put yourself out there a little more, as signified by Leo. So July's theme, I would say the 1st to like the 20th is water, water, water. Like everything is water. It really feels overwhelming just looking at how much water is in the chart. And the song that I thought of when I saw all of this water was Water by Tyla. Do you know that song? Made me sweat, made me hurt, made me lose my breath. Okay, so you might want to like channel that water energy, allow the water to make you float and flow, and just think about all the significations of what water does, right? It helps purify, cleanse, it helps you to feel and flow. Money is a lot of people say money is energy, and the words that we use to describe money, like income stream, right? And money flow, it's like all signified by water, because you want to be in the receptive mode to receive. I mean, you want to be in the receptive mode anyway in order to call in and be ready for the things that you're manifesting. So water seasons are really great for that kind of work. And you want to make sure that you're, again, going internally, going within to fine tune your energy. And you do that by being real with how you feel. What do you feel about money? How do you feel about money? Were you taught that money is hard to get? Like I was taught that, because I have 2 immigrant parents. Were you taught that money is like bad, that the root of all evil is money, right? So you want to really like feel into your body, feel into what these words, how these words trigger you, and journal and just be real. No one's watching you. Like if you really do think money sucks, then write that down. But then like, how can you start healing those things within? Okay, so I just wanted to give you an example because it is Cancer season right now. That just happened to me this morning. So this morning, my father, he said that my mother was like, he said it to my mom that I can't live without you. And I asked my mom, like, if she knew what that meant. And she said codependency. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Because my parents have a very codependent relationship. And this is a aspect of their relationship that I learned and was not really healthy. And that pattern kind of repeated in my platonic and my romantic relationships. But then like I just started talking to my mom about when she first moved to the US, and she was 24, and she graduated college, and then 2 years later she married my dad, and then she moved to the US and didn't know the language. She didn't really know English. The next day, so she arrived in the United States, and the next day she went to work at my father's fruit and vegetable store in New York City. Now, just imagine that you're 24, you just landed in a foreign country in New York City, which isn't like the most friendliest place on earth, and she's working in a fruit and vegetable store. She said she had to count out money that she didn't even like know what this meant, and she really depended on my father and his family, because she was alone here. And so to a certain extent, she really depended on him for her survival and vice versa. So it kind of gave me the missing piece to my own story about like where these behaviors come from, because codependency to a certain extent came from an energy of survival. And I'm really like a cycle breaker. Like I really want to break away from these cycles of just surviving. And so having that piece of information and knowledge helped me to understand why they are that way, and I can choose differently. I can say that's not the kind of relationship that I want, because that codependent relationship really hurt me in my last romantic and platonic relationships. So there's a bunch of things, like there's a bunch of different astrological transits that are asking me to like really heal that. It's not just that it's Cancer season, which is my personal eighth house of transformation and intimacy and bonds, but Saturn in Pisces is currently traveling my fourth house of parents and home. So when you have like a water trine, because trines are flowing energies, it really does um like these feelings and these experiences are really at the forefront of my experience, like literally at home and having these conversations with my parents. So just think of like your Cancer house and your Pisces house, what houses those are, and like what topics are coming up for you. Um, okay, let's see. So then I mentioned Pluto re-entering the sign of Capricorn on in September. And then it's going to be at 29 degrees. Neptune right now is at 29 degrees of Pisces. Um, Saturn is in Pisces in retrograde, and Uranus is in Taurus at its last degrees. And so like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the outer planets, are in the last degrees of their sign, and they're going to all change in 2026. They're going to start changing next year in 2025, and then they will all be there in 2026, which is exactly like I mentioned in the beginning, the 250-year anniversary, the Pluto return, the end of empire for the United States. So I don't think that these are coincidences. I believe we all, yeah, we're all being prepared right now. We're all going to really figure out like why we're here and who we are. So just to go off on a little like Saturn in retrograde story tangent, I was reading someone's chart a couple days ago, and she was born in 2000. And I was like, how do I give advice to someone who sees life and time in a totally different way? And I asked her, like, do you think about your life in terms of like career or life purpose? And she said that she feels a lot of pressure to figure it out now. Like she feels like this is a 24-year-old person, that time is running out. And I really do believe that it's a collective consciousness thing right now. Like I mentioned, all the outer planets are in their last degrees. And, you know, it just feels like very critical right now, more than ever, to know your purpose and why you came here, because our concept of time is changing, as signified by Saturn and Pisces. It feels like there's an urgency because we are witnessing the collapse of something. And a lot of us are going to need to have, like, again, the midwives and the doulas of, like, the death doulas of the old empire. And then what are we creating next? Like, what are we doing next after this? That we have to be creating something that works for us. So I just thought that was interesting because here I am, like, trying to give advice to a 24-year-old. And I think it doesn't really matter how old you are. If you are like conscious right now in this timeline, I think we all collectively feel like this is an important time. Okay, so the last thing I'll say before we go into the daily transits is Pluto and Aquarius. So I'm going to give you a lot of dates, and I'm going to just mention a lot of the Pluto and Aquarius transits, just because, like, we are literally in the first couple of degrees of Aquarius, and this has never happened before in our lifetime. So, like, these first couple of degrees in Aquarius will give you hints about the themes and topics that you will be going through for the next 20 years. And the house that you have Aquarius will be undergoing a transformation. And so for me personally, I had Pluto in Aquarius in my third house. The third house is the mind, it's communication, it's speaking, it's writing, it's also social media. And I have personal planets there. So I became obsessed with researching information. And it was to the point where I couldn't stop. Like, I was just going down these rabbit holes. I was seeing, like, literally the worst of humanity, like the genocide unfolding. And not just the genocide in Palestine, but the genocide in the Sudan, the Congo. And it's really started to affect my mental health. And I was getting into this, like, dark place of despair, which I'm not like that. I am a very optimistic person. And so I was thinking to myself, okay, when Pluto really goes back in November to Aquarius, and it's going to be there for 20 years, how can I have a sustainable way of consuming information that I can digest and that is sustainable for the long term? And also, how can I communicate and do my purpose here on Earth? Because ultimately, Pluto is about power. So you go into the shadow realm to find the power, and then you end up being like, you end up alchemizing some wound that you end up being like this, I'm just thinking about, like, Pluto and Aquarius, like, the power to the people, like, we are the people, we're going to be the ones that save us, for example. Okay, I'm just going to take a little sip of water. So on July 2nd, Mercury at 29 degrees of Cancer will trine Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces, which is the anaretic degree. The anaretic degree is the critical degree of every sign, because so this is why I love astrology. And when I ask people about, like, their sun, moon, and rising, I always ask them what their degrees are, because like, I'm a 0 degrees Aries. A 0 degrees Aries is so different than a 29 degrees Aries. because each sign has 0 to 29 degrees. And even further than that, they're broken down into decans. Like decan 1 of Aries is ruled by Mars. Do I have that right? And the second one is ruled by the sun, and the third decan of Aries is ruled by Venus. So being a first decan Aries ruled by Mars is way different energy than a third decan Aries that's ruled by Venus. Okay, so the degrees matter because also you want to see like astrology is all about aspects and the conversations that the planets are having with each other. So Mercury at 29 degrees of Cancer, and which is trine to Neptune in Pisces, Mercury's having a conversation with Neptune because Mercury is leaving Cancer because it's a faster planet than Neptune. Before it enters Leo, it's like, okay, Neptune, what message do you have to send to me? And because it's a trine, it's like a harmonious download. If this was a square, it'd be like, okay, we're not seeing eye to eye on something, and so we have to integrate something. So every time a personal planet will leave the sign of Cancer, which first will be Mercury, then the sun, no, wait, Venus, and then the sun, I believe. They will have a conversation with Neptune. So to me, this feels a lot like, okay, Mercury, Venus, and the sun leaving the sign of Cancer, they were doing a lot of like internal work. They were going within, like remembering who they are, remembering that everything is, within our own energy. And honestly, how we manifest, how we co-create is through our emotional body. These planets are asking Neptune, and Neptune is giving the download. Like, don't forget about your dreams. Don't forget about your imagination, because your imagination is how you create worlds. I think that's very important. So then on the same day, so July 2nd is a very big day of multiple transits. The sun at 11 degrees of Cancer will square the North Node at 11 degrees of Aries. And just think back to June 26th when Venus was at the bending. So when a planet is square the nodes, it's called the bendings. I have Saturn at my bendings. And it's just a good day to like look out for like what happens, or if you get any signs or omens or people that come into your life, because they can kind of be like destined or just like critical points that signify a big change. And because the nodes and the sun in Cancer are in cardinal signs, it does signify that something's about to change. So that's just a good day. I mean, this is all happening on July 2nd. And then Venus at 19 degrees of Cancer will trine Saturn at 19 degrees of Pisces, and Saturn is retrograde. So Venus at 19 degrees will square to the eclipse points that happen on April 8th. So if you remember back at the solar eclipse in Aries that happened on April 8th, it was at 19 degrees. The sun will be at 19 degrees of Cancer on July 10th, which was also trine Saturn. And Mercury was at 19 degrees of Cancer on June 26th, also trine Saturn. So again, I think there's something happening where Venus, Mercury, the sun are squaring the eclipse point. So the solar eclipse in Aries was like this massive faded beginning, right? Of like your Aries house, 19 degrees. And a solar eclipse is a new moon, and a new moon is a dark moon. I mean, if you were able to see it like I did, I went to Buffalo, New York, the moon literally eclipsed the sun. So there's not much happening. Like a new moon is basically like a clean slate. There's a portal opening, but it takes daily intentional action steps to actually make something like come physically into fruition. And so Venus, the Sun, Mercury squaring the eclipse points, trine to Saturn in Pisces is kind of like something is becoming solidified. I mean, Saturn in Pisces is not necessarily like earthly or like grounded, but again, like I mentioned, like everything starts with our emotional body and how we feel about things. Our emotions, I hate when people keep saying this, but our emotions are energy in motion. It's so annoying, but it's so true. Like how we really feel about things, what we believe is possible for us is how we start co-creating. And so if you feel not, if you don't feel worthy, if you don't feel like it's possible, it's already not going to happen for you. So when you set those intentions back in the solar eclipse in Aries, and now these personal planets are squaring that point, again, connecting with Saturn, it's like, okay, let's get real here. Like, is this actually happening? Have you taken the necessary action steps to make this a reality? You know? So that's just something to think about. Venus, again, is the planet about worth and relationships, your own worth. Do you feel worthy of the things that you were asking for? Mercury is about communication and downloads, being receptive. And then the sun is your life force energy, your spirit. So just some things to think about. And these are water signs. Again, just being really real with your feelings. And are you avoiding your feelings? That's something that we were just never taught, like how to feel, but then not hold it and allow it to be released and transmuted. You know, how do you go from feeling grief and mourning to then turning that energy into like action? Because that is where I feel like collectively social media is just not a good place for, because it's all trauma dumping. I mean, we need social media to be aware, right? We need to know that we need to have the information that we need to make a change. But if we're constantly just being shown like little kids being blown up and all the bad stuff, all the terrible shit that's happening in the world, but you need to take some time to then digest that information and allow that energy to move through you, and then use that energy to be uncomfortable so that you use that uncomfortable feeling to then change, you know? And we need more people to help us to teach other people how to do that. Okay. So then also on the same day, on July 2nd, Mercury will enter the sign of Leo. Mercury in water signs is so interesting. I have a Mercury in a water sign, and actually it's fallen and in detriment in Pisces, which normally Mercury in water signs don't necessarily want to talk a lot. They're kind of like nonverbal, but I don't know, like it's definitely because my Mercury is making connections to other planets. I talk a lot. So you kind of go from Mercury in Cancer, which is like just observing and maybe taking it all in and like being a little bit more silent and secretive, to then Mercury entering Leo. It's like, okay, now I really want to say what has been on my mind. I know two people with Mercury and Leos, and they love giving words of affirmation and they love receiving words of affirmation. A shadow aspect of Mercury and Leo is love bombing. Like, oh my God, you're so great. Just to like, without it feeling genuine. But my two Mercury and Leo friends are very conscious people. And when they tell me like that I'm doing great and that I'm amazing, like I really do believe them, because they don't really say that to a lot of people. So love that, Mercury and Leo. Then Neptune at 29 degrees and 56 minutes in Pisces will go retrograde conjunct the fixed star Shiat. I don't think in any of my previous forecasts I brought up the fixed stars, but I do use the fixed stars in my personal practice. And I just know this fixed star because it's conjunct my IC and my sun. So I just wanted to read a little bit about this fixed star, and it's spelled Scheat. And Neptune is literally almost in Aries. It's like 29 degrees and 56 minutes. It's so close. And it's literally just sitting there at the last degree. And it goes retrograde on July 2nd. So it's conjunct this fixed star. And this description is from the Astrology King. And just as a heads up, fixed stars, I mean, like if you think back in the day when the Persians and like the Chinese and the ancients used fixed stars, it was a pretty doom and gloom time. So a lot of them have like uh more negative descriptions, but if we were to use them in modern times, take everything with a grain of salt. Okay, so the fixed star Scheat is in the constellation of Pegasus. The flying horse gives ambition, vanity, intuition, enthusiasm, caprice, and bad judgment. It prevails against the diseases of horses and preserves horsemen in battle. According to Ptolemy, the bright stars are like Mars and Mercury. The constellation portends events concerning ships and the ocean, and also changes in the weather. In medieval times, it was said to indicate vain individuals with a great deal of ambition, but very poor judgment. Okay, so what I found interesting too is it has to do with like drownings and accidents, tsunamis, storms, and shipwrecks. And I do think it's interesting that the United States is a Sagittarius rising. So the Pisces whole sign house is the fourth house. And um and 29 degrees of Pisces, Neptune and Pisces would be in the United States' fourth house, right? And I don't know, I just couldn't help but think about that pier, that crazy expensive tax dollar funded Gaza aid pier that like washed away during a storm, and then they rebuilt it, and then they like used it for some shady operation, and then now they're like dismantling it. And it was like, what was the purpose of that? Like I just couldn't help but think about that, because it was like um they used it quote unquote for aid, but then I think that it had more nefarious intentions. But it's kind of like this fixed star that you should be wary of, because it's unfortunate star regarding the sea. It says it was said to indicate danger from that element in the form of tidal waves or violent storms. So I don't know, it could also mean that there's going to be a lot more hurricanes this year. It can mean that there's a lot of flooding in the United States because of the storms, like the climate crisis is a big deal. And our elected officials are just like, I don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just not taking it seriously. Like we need money in our infrastructure, not on wars. But again, I'm going off on this tangent. So I do find it interesting that Neptune is stationing on this fixed star. And I just again, I paid attention to it because it's conjunct my IC and my sun. So I'm always like, what does this mean? Thankfully, I've never had an accident in the sea or any like massive catastrophe, but it really does also portend to creativity. Here we go. It says like, um, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to have a positive spin on this. Um, The star imparts to its native stubbornness, one who can be headstrong of a combative nature. The native lose friends, lose friends and acquaintances, may be unfortunate, of a changeable, almost unpredictable nature, has high enterprise, and may be subject to violence. May become of controversial nature, fantasizes. So there is something to be said about like very headstrong, very stubborn, um, kind of controversial. And, the United States has Neptune in Virgo. So there's like a Neptune opposition. So I think the positive spin is that maybe this will help people take what's happening more seriously. And I don't know, like, not that I think like controversial, not that I think combativeness is like necessarily a good thing, but maybe we need more people to be active and engaged and go against the grain and go against the status quo, for example. And then just Neptune retrograde in general, Neptune represents photography, film, illusions. When I speak to other astrologers, we all believe that LA has a very Neptunian feeling because it's like, what is reality? When Neptune retrogrades, I really do believe like the water recedes and you can really see like what's been underneath the water, like what's been really in the surface. Don't ever be afraid of retrogrades. Like I have a lot of retrograde planets in my chart. Retrograde just means return. It's when the planet is actually closer to Earth based on its retrograde cycle. It just looks and feels like it's moving backward based on our rotation around the sun and the rotation of the planet around the sun as well. It's just kind of an illusion itself, an optical illusion. But what these retrograde planets help us do is to kind of return back and be more reflective in all of the forward, like yang masculine movement we've made. So some questions we might ask ourselves are what is reality? Honestly, a good movie is The Labyrinth. I love that movie. I bring that movie up all the time during Pisces season. If you haven't watched it, David Bowie, yes. And also The Matrix. Like that movie in a nutshell is very Neptunian, very Piscean. It's like, what is real? What is the Matrix? Okay, so that was just July 2nd. On July 3rd, Mercury at 1 degree of Leo will oppose Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. So, Mercury again is the messenger of the gods. Mercury is the only god that was able to enter the underworld to also usher people, to help people transition into death. And Pluto is the god of the underworld. So anytime I see Mercury contacting Pluto, there could be some like information that comes out that was hidden, something scandalous, something that, you weren't privy to at like a personal level, but then in the collective level, this could be like secret CIA files that come out that you're like, what the heck? But kind of makes sense, or like, I don't know, just something that comes out to the surface that, you're just like, oh my gosh, but you're meant to see in order for you to fully integrate the shadow that was hidden before. So on July 5th, let me move this away. Okay. So, first of all, July 4th is the solar return of the United States of America. Solar return means birthday. So, here in the US, which I was born and raised, people celebrate Independence Day from the British Empire when the original settlers didn't want to pay taxes without representation. I just find this all to be very ironic and very like on time. The United States has a stellium of planets of Cancer in the eighth house, which is other people's money. So it's like the founding fathers wanted to fight from their independence from the British Empire, King George III, that was increasingly increasing the taxes of the colonialists to pay, but they weren't being represented in the parliament. So the settlers came together and they're like, they wrote the Declaration of Independence declaring that they were going to, break free, revolt against the empire. And because they felt like they weren't being represented and they felt like it wasn't fair. So I do find that ironic because 2023 to 2024, this was just the recent awakening that our US tax dollars are funding a genocide in Palestine. And I would say the average American person doesn't want our tax dollars to murder innocent people anywhere. And there's still 20,000 children buried under the rubble. And they just passed a bill that they won't disclose the number of people in Palestine, in Gaza, who have been murdered. I don't think that's an accident. And maybe on that July 3rd, the Mercury opposite Pluto will actually find a number out or something. But I just think it's, again, interesting, I'll say that word, that the same themes are coming up at this time because we, the people, do not want our tax dollars to be funding war, genocide. And we, like, personally, I would want, this is what I'm going to put out to the universe. I don't have a problem paying for taxes, but I would like free healthcare, free education, investing in infrastructure, and actually like re-indigenizing the United States, giving land back and reparations. And because honestly, that is the only way we are going to repair the damage of climate crisis. We have the money. It's clear we have the money to solve the houseless problem, the poverty problem. Everybody can have a home and food and clean water, and reinvest in healthcare and education and the arts programs. And it's clear we have the money because they just sent like $95 billion to Taiwan and Ukraine and Israel like a couple months ago with our tax dollars. So I just, again, I can't help but see these transits and think, wow, like the sooner we wake up, the sooner we realize we are worthy and that we have everything we need inside to be the change, we can totally turn this around. So with that being said, on July 5th, which is the day after the United States solar return, Mars at 19 degrees of Taurus will sextile Saturn retrograde in 19 degrees of Pisces. Now, a couple of months, I haven't been including the sextiles, but I really do believe that the sextiles, for some reason, in the month of July, offer some extra support, especially with all of these water placements, Mars being in Taurus, which Mars doesn't necessarily have all of its resources, right? Because Mars is said to be in its detriment, or it's like debilitated, it doesn't have all its resources in a Venus ruled sign of Taurus. But I do believe Mars and Taurus gives us that extra groundedness being in a earth sign. And so Mars and Saturn, two malefics in a harmonious aspect, I do believe it gives support to this new moon in Cancer, which is conjunct Sirius, the dog star. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I I do believe it's interesting that this new moon, which is conjunct the star, is is happening in the US Sibley chart in the eighth house because the new moon is conjunct the US's natal sun. So I really recommend Alice Cat Sparkley's article about Sirius. They are a prolific writer. They also have Mercury and Pisces, like myself, just to throw that out there. So Sirius is a revered star of the Egyptians and the a lot of East Asians and also the indigenous Americans. So I'm just going to read a little bit about Sirius here. In almost every story that I could find regarding Sirius, it's a dog. Homer called it Orion's dog. East Asians called it the celestial wolf, and indigenous Americans called it moondog or coyote. The name Sirius comes from Osiris, who replaced Anubis, another dog, as the god of the underworld. All of the clients who have hard aspects with Sirius have some kind of relationship with some kind of lone wolf complex, which is something that they see shape their own lives or whether it shaped the personality of someone close to them. Especially when Sirius hard aspects the moon, it creates a sense of cultural alienation. People with intense relationships to Sirius often feel like they're the dark sheep in the family. A lot of folks with the star prominent in their charts are first generation immigrants, are estranged from family, or exist as outliers in some way. Sirius people live in the in betweens. They're often too queer for the straights, not queer enough somehow for the queers, too American for their family, or too other for their chosen family. Okay, so Sirius is a star that deals with memory. However, Sirius doesn't deal with real memory, but fabricated memory. Sirius people are people who often fit in neither with their biological family nor their chosen family. They often play the role of the dark sheep or the lone wolf in both social spaces. However, Sirius isn't really about perpetual alienation. Sirius people aren't fated to always feel alienated. Rather, Sirius simply likes to orbit itself because it is an anachronistic star. I mean, the whole article is so like awakening, and they really do a great job of I've spoken about Alice Sparkley Cat a lot on this podcast because I interviewed them on their book Post-Colonial Astrology, but it really got me thinking because again, like the USA has its natal sun in Cancer conjunct the star. So in some ways that's like the identity of the US. Like we are the we are like the lone wolf, you know, we're always the victim. We're always, and in certain aspects, that wound kind of comes out in being kind of like a terrorist kind of, you know. I don't know, I'm going to do a whole thing maybe even on July 4th on the USA Sibley chart, the US natal chart, because it just also got me thinking about like this new moon that is conjunct Sirius and how a lot of our wounding around not being understood by people, and but also Sirius being this star, like very lucky wealth star. And it's not a coincidence that the founders of the US, the OG colonizers, settlers, were Freemasons who were into geomancy, who were into astrology, and they, you know, picked that time on July 5th, 1776, on 5:10 p.m. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to sign the Declaration of Independence. That's like what we call electional astrology. They picked that time specifically and all the planetary alignments in order for the US to be like a superpower. So it's just interesting how, again, like in astrology, like we have duality. So in one aspect, Sirius is this like planet of wealth, and it was a very revered star in Egypt. Um, it actually signifies, when Sirius, the constellation, starts rising with the eastern horizon, and Lionsgate being the peak of that star coming up to the horizon is when the Nile River starts to fill up, and that's when people thought that that was a really fertile time, was when the Nile River would rise with the rising of Sirius the star. So again, it's like it's this signal of fertility and abundance and wealth, but also like you might feel like the lone wolf, you might not feel understood. So this is like baked into this new moon in Cancer. And Cancer, the new moon in Cancer is always the most profound and powerful because the moon is in its domicile in Cancer. And I always love using this new moon to really plant seeds, to really be clear on what it is that I'm calling in, because our words are spells, spellings, right? We cast them out into the universe. Our words have vibration. So my advice to you is on July 5th to be just very conscious of how you're feeling, what you're saying, who you're surrounding yourself with. Um, and yes, just set like massive intentions on this day. So that's July 5th. It's the day after the solar return of the US. I'll have more to say about that. But let's move on to July 8th. Venus at 26 degrees of Cancer will sextile Uranus in Taurus. Again, sextiles are just really supportive. So Uranus has obviously been traveling through the sign of Taurus since about 2018, sorry. And Venus likes being in Cancer. Venus wants to form intimate bonds. And so, yeah, it's just really supportive energy around, um, you know, making connections that are maybe a little bit outside your comfort zone, change, maybe changing up your routine in some way. The same day, Mercury at 9 degrees of Leo was sextile Jupiter and Gemini. Again, a very supportive energy of communication, building bonds. And then Mercury at 10 Leo will trine the North Node in Aries at 10 degrees Aries. So Mercury will trine the North Node. This is just a good day to like get out there, make connections, like talk, communicate, say what it is that you need, say affirmations to yourself. Yeah, I really like this day. July 8th feels like a really good day to socialize. Then July 9th, Jupiter at 10 degrees of Gemini. Oh, wait, did I already say that? Jupiter at 10 degrees of Gemini. Oh, no. Okay. So then on July 9th, Jupiter at 10 degrees of Gemini will sextile the North Node. Same thing. So like Jupiter and Gemini will make this harmonious aspect to the North Node in Aries. But sextiles are the nature of Venus. So it is something that like you need to get out there and make a move. You need to take some kind of action. It's not just going to happen to you, It's kind of like Jupiter and Gemini, sextile the North Node in Aries is like being at the right place at the right time energy. So then July 10th, the sun at 19 degrees of Cancer will trine Saturn retrograde in 19 degrees of Pisces. And I already mentioned the 19th degree in Cancer, which will square the eclipse point. So just maybe look out think back to what happened around April 19th, which was April 8th, which was the eclipse at 19 degrees, and see if something pops off on this day. Let me just take a sip of water. Okay. On July 11th, Venus at 29 degrees of Cancer will trine Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces. And a little bit later that day, Venus will enter Leo. This is like going back to what I said on July 2nd when Mercury was trine to Neptune. Every time a planet leaves Cancer, it's making a connection to Neptune and getting a little download before entering Leo. So like Venus is finishing up its journey through Cancer and getting a little download from Neptune. I can't tell you what that download is. This is something that you might need to tune into, listen to your intuition, look out for the signs and omens. Like Neptune and Pisces is very like omens, symbols, like learning how to interpret like angel numbers, learning how to interpret that kind of stuff, and really like checking in with yourself. Okay, like what has Cancer season been really like trying to show me? Like what has my journey internally have been requiring a change of me internally? And that last connection to Neptune is like, okay, use your imagination, believe in your dreams, you know? So then on July 12th is another pretty big day. Venus at 1 degree of Leo will oppose Pluto retrograde at 1 degree of Aquarius. So oppositions to Pluto are not always easy because that can speak of power dynamics, especially with Venus and Pluto. It's like Venus in Leo is like, I believe in my worth. I'm sexy as fuck. I'm having the summer of my lifetime, but that person over there is like not giving me what I desire. That person is not meeting me where I need them to meet me. Or it's like what you desire is in conflict with what the collective or what the group or what the community is like offering you. And so just think back to February 17th, Venus and Pluto were together at 0 degrees. That started this journey together in this conjunction. May 1st is when Venus and Taurus were square at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So that opening square, it was like, okay, this is whatever intention you set with the Venus Pluto at 0 degrees. This is the first like crossroad. Then on May 25th, Venus at 1 degree of Gemini was trine to Pluto in Aquarius retrograde. So it was like, okay, we're making a connection here. Something maybe was like, so some like a intention you might have set with Venus and Pluto at Aquarius was like, all right, I want to be more of a powerful presence in my community. The square was like, okay, but like I'm going to have to work on my self-worth with Taurus. And then Venus trine Gemini was like, okay, maybe I'm going to start a podcast. That's how I'm going to show up. And now at this opposition, it's like, okay, maybe you're getting some feedback of, you know, your listener saying some like maybe like negative comments about you. Well, are you going to allow those negative comments to stop you, or are you going to start like really looking at your shadow and asking yourself, why does this bother me? For example, what I find interesting is on December 7th, Venus and Pluto will come back again at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and Pluto will be direct at that time. So it's almost like Venus and Pluto are kind of having this like less than 1 year journey together, and then they're going to reset again in December. So this is a really good cycle to keep track of, because I remember in February, when Venus and Pluto were together, I was thinking about starting this podcast with the other organization that I was with. And, you know, at the square, it was like, okay, how can we really make this happen? We were kind of running against like a budget issue. And then the Venus and Gemini Pluto was like, oh, I think we're going to do this instead. And we were kind of moving forward. And then I mean, before the opposition, it's like, okay, it's not going to happen. But then for me personally, it's like, I'm actually going to just, um, I'm going to reinvest energy into my own podcast and, cause, Aquarius is my third house. So, um, yeah. And I think maybe when December comes, it's like, a reset. It's like maybe there'll be like another launch or something like that, for example. Okay, moving right along. July 15th, which is a day you want to definitely highlight and be aware of. Mars at 26 degrees of Taurus will conjunct Uranus and Taurus, and they will be conjunct the fixed star Algol. This is very difficult. I'm not gonna lie. So Mars has a severing quality. It has a cutting away quality, which can. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you the difficult and then end it with a positive, so that we end in a positive. And then Uranus is has a awakening, sudden, revolutionary quality to it. So Mars and Uranus together is like breaking free of something in the sign of Taurus, which is like something that you might have been fixed, something that might have been like stagnant for a while, or something that like, you felt very like grounded in. Algol is a fixed star that has a lot of negative connotations, and I've read a lot about different astrologers' take on Algol, and the overall consensus is like it is more of a malefic, a violent fixed star. It follows the mythology around Medusa and Perseus, who, if you know that mythology, first of all, I really want us to like also read the decolonized versions of these mythologies, because Medusa, if you read the mythology around it, is so sad. It's so sad. Like all of these mythologies are just so tragic. I mean, Greek mythologies, right? But basically Perseus hunts down Medusa and chops off her head, and that's why Algol, it signifies like off with their head kind of energy. And if you remember back at the end of May, because I will remember this for the rest of my life, when we were having all of those conjunctions in the sign of Taurus and Uranus, and May 26th specifically, Uranus was at 23 degrees. So it's still like 3-degree orb from Algol. Algol is at 26 degrees. That was the day when collectively people were shocked to see a beheaded baby on Instagram. And I think that was the turning point of people's awareness around what was going on in Gaza, because all of a sudden then people were posting like all eyes on Rafah, but it was because of that video that a lot of people were shocked. So I only bring this up because that was like a literal manifestation of this fixed star. And again, I don't want to like fear monger, but just take this day to be very mindful of your nervous system. Please move slowly, especially if you have personal planets that are square or conjunct or opposing this. This is happening in my sixth house of health. So I'm just like really paying attention to my health right now. Like I've been taking care of my body. I've been trying to eating, well, and just moving my body and taking care of my mental health. But this is just not a day to like rush and like fuck around, honestly. But on a positive note, this might be the breakthrough that you've been waiting for. Like Taurus is a fixed earth sign. It does not fucking move. So with Uranus being that breaking free energy and Mars having that severing quality, it might be just the thing to like set you free. So that is the positive note. Again, I just be very, very wary. I don't often say this a lot because I always like think that, these difficult transits are always there to help us become more free, but also like if the energy is there, why not just be more careful, you know? Okay, so then on July 16th, so July like 14th, 15th, 16th, I would just take it easy, you know? July 16th, Mercury will be in shadow officially at 21 degrees of Leo, and then it'll go retrograde on August 5th at 4 degrees of Virgo. Now, there's 3 phases of any retrograde, but you can really track it because Mercury's retrogrades are 3 weeks. And so during the shadow is when you start to see the topics of what the retrograde will be like. So that's like when the planet Mercury looks like it's slowing down based on our orbit around the sun and Mercury's orbit around the sun. And usually I find that Mercury retrograde things will happen during the Mercury shadow. And then when Mercury goes retrograde, it's the time to kind of reflect and refine and do all the things like readjust and, revisit. And then during the post shadow, when Mercury retraces its steps back, is when we get to put things into action. And, I really do Stephanie Campos, my friend, always says Mercury retrogrades are such a great antidote to capitalism because it makes you just take a moment's pause and reflect. So that happens on July 16th. On July 18th, the sun in 26 Cancer was sextile Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus. So we already experienced Mercury sextiling Uranus, then we experienced the Venus sextiling Uranus. And so each of these personal planets in Cancer touching Uranus is just maybe asking a part of us to just consider some change, right? A change of routine, a change of how we internally need to shift. And again, it's just keep recalibrating and tweaking your vibration. July 19th, Venus in 9 degrees of Leo will trine the North Node at 9 degrees of Aries. This is so sweet and so sexy. Okay. So Venus in Leo is getting out there. Okay. Venus in Leo doesn't necessarily want to be tied down. Venus in a fire sign is let's be flirty. Let's go on an adventure. Let's try on new clothing. Let's just try new things. And being trine to the North Node in Aries, again, Aries energy is taking a risk. It's fuck around and find out. I think that's really, really a good day to do something risky, do something fun, as an Aries sun myself, I'm always telling people to do that. July 20th, we have Mars entering the sign of Gemini, and Mars was in the sign of Gemini in 2022. So you might want to reflect back to that time. And before that, Mars will be at 29 degrees of Taurus, sextiling Neptune in 29 degrees of Mars in Taurus will sextile Neptune before it enters Gemini. So again, Mars is going to get this little download from Neptune, and then it'll enter Gemini. Mars in Gemini you could have a lot more arguments depending on where your Gemini house is. It can be this drive and passion to gather information, to get curious, to be more in your head and think about a lot of things, get curious, but also at the same time, Mars in Gemini is just really loud and very argumentative. So that's what we're working with. And then July 21st will be the second full moon in the sign of Capricorn at 29 degrees. But this time will be conjunct Pluto in Aquarius at 0 degrees retrograde. The same day, Venus at 12 degrees of Leo will sextile Jupiter at 12 degrees of Gemini. That's very cute. Mercury at 26 degrees of Leo will square Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus. Oh my God, there's so much is happening on this day. The sun at 29 degrees of Cancer will trine Neptune in Pisces, right? Because a full moon is when the sun is opposite the moon. And Mars at 0 degrees of Gemini will trine Pluto retrograde at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So there's like a lot happening. I'm actually going to pull up this chart, maybe. This full moon happens at 6:17 a.m. Eastern time. Adjust for your time zone. So here we have the sun at 29 degrees of Cancer. And like I mentioned, it will be making a trine to Neptune and Pisces at 29 degrees. Very cute. Great for downloads. And when I say by downloads, I mean like being in the receiving mode, like allowing yourself to have a moment of silence and being, meditation, walking, whatever it is, journaling, to receive something, to receive, because we're always receiving signs and messages, but are we quiet enough to like hear it? So the sun is opposite the moon at 29 degrees of Capricorn, conjunct Pluto at 0 degrees. Great. And then what else did I say here? Venus at 12 degrees of Leo here will be sextile Jupiter in Gemini, and Mercury in Leo at 26 degrees will be square to Uranus in Taurus. Okay, so the ruler of the full moon is Saturn at 19 degrees of Pisces. So this is the second full moon in the sign of Capricorn. And the first full moon happened on June 21st after the solstice. We talked about this at the beginning. And it was at 1 degree. So if you didn't really pay attention to that full moon, or like you didn't feel like it was significant in any way, this might feel significant just because the moon is at the anaretic degree and it's conjunct Pluto. So Saturnian lessons are all about maturation, discipline, and responsibility. And what I was saying in the beginning of this podcast is, or this episode is, there's an area of our life or multiple areas of our life where we're being asked to take responsibility for something and to step up and to take responsibility for our life. Because we live in a patriarchy, which is normally the signification of Saturn. And this patriarchy, the system that we are living under, it infantilizes people to believe, and brainwashing us to believe, that we don't have the power within us to create change. We have to look at a leader, or we have to look at a politician. We have to look at our parents. We have to look at these people in power that honestly have power because of a racist system. It's not really based in anything real, but that, it's not based on integrity. It's not based on life. It's not based on morals or values. And it should be very apparent to you by now. So these full moons and Capricorns are asking us to fucking step up and say to ourselves, this is our planet. This is our earth. This is our community. These are our lives. These are people's lives at stake. We need to fucking be the change that we want to see. And we don't need a president. We don't need a leader. We don't need anybody to save us. This is very much Pluto and Aquarius, we the people. And I think the thing that really, really hit me is just seeing like very progressive liberals talk about Donald Trump and how we need to like do whatever it takes to like not vote for him because he appointed these justices who are basically putting these draconian laws into place, and how he's a felony and he's a criminal, and um he's been guilty of felonies and he's just like the worst, which I agree with. But how is that not also just as bad on the same playing field as Genocide Joe, who co-signs a genocide with our tax dollars? Like, I see them all as being, and you can disagree with me for sure. Like, I don't expect anybody to have the same politic as me, but I'm just expressing my own belief and feelings about this right now. Like, for me, everything is interconnected. And for me, it is like the United States has one party, whether it's Democrat, Republican, is the same thing. I don't think we actually have a choice. I think choice is an illusion for us. And a lot of people have been brainwashed to believe that the lesser of two evils and that we only have this as an option. Meanwhile, I think Pisces energy, Saturn and Neptune going retrograde, is dissolving what is reality, dissolving the structures and allowing us to imagine something differently, allowing us to see that there are other options. Like, for example, third party, right? We really need to talk more about that. We have third party options. Dr. Jill Stein, Brother Cornel West, Claudia, and I forget the other woman's name from the Bronx. Like, I think because we've been trained and programmed and conditioned to believe that we live in a binary system of it's either this or that, lesser of two evils, that we keep repeating these cycles. What I'm asking you, and what Jupiter and Gemini and all these mutable energies, right? Mutable signs are Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Virgo, are asking you to like dissolve what you know, dissolve the structures and the frameworks to see things maybe in a different way, that maybe there are other options we just weren't privy to. Start talking to people. The only reason why I know this is possible is because of social media and talking to people, that and that's the biggest reason why I have so much hope, is because so many people are talking about these things. So it's not a coincidence that we have two full moons in Capricorn, this one being at the anaretic degree. And we literally just talked about how um, Pluto will re-enter into Capricorn in September at 29 degrees. Neptune is at 29 degrees. And it's like the universe is almost like, come on, people, get it together. You can do this, you know? And I do believe this is an absolutely pivotal full moon to release the old structures and the old paradigm that we've been stuck in, so that when we go into Pluto and Aquarius like full on in November, we are structuring the new paradigm. And I don't believe it's going to be easy necessarily, but I do believe if we're prepared, like I keep saying, that we can prepare ourselves step by step. Okay. I do believe the Venus and Jupiter, that sextile is really cute. That's really good for like connections. Like I said, community, community, community. That is how we will get through. How do you build community? You build community through trust. You build trust through investing your time and energy in forming bonds with people, get to know people, show up for people, start being vulnerable with people. And Bell Hook's book, All About Love, she has a whole chapter about community love and communal love and why that's so important. And everybody asks, like, where can I find community? And, I want to be in community, but it really takes intentional effort to be in community with people. Like, I drove to New Jersey, like 2 hours in traffic to show up for my friend. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. I wanted to be home in my PJs watching the bear and watching Netflix, but it's really important for me to show up for people and to get to know them and to be vulnerable with them, because that's how we build trust and that's how we build community. So that Venus sextile Jupiter and like all of these like Jupiter and Gemini and the connections to like all these personal planets is really asking us to expand in our connections and our networks and our curiosity and open up our minds. A lot of people say like Gemini energy is chaotic. Is it chaotic, or is your mind just trying to break you free from something that you previously thought you knew? Okay, so that full moon, I hope I said everything because it's a pretty big deal. But oh, and then Mars at 0 degrees of Gemini will trine Pluto retrograde in 0 degrees of Aquarius. So just remember back to February 14th, Mars and Pluto were conjunct at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And then on June 11th, Mars and Pluto were square at 1 degrees of Aquarius. December 6th, we're going to look to the future for a moment. Mars will be retrograding in Leo. So Mars is going to have its moment through Leo. We had a Venus retrograde last summer in 2023, and then Mars is going to be there this summer. In the winter. Okay, so on we're almost there. July 22nd, the sun enters Leo. Thank the heavens, thank the universe. As a fire sign, you will have these beautiful trines. Hallelujah, because again, like water seasons for fire and air signs is a rough thing. Fire signs for water and earth signs is going to be interesting. It's going to make you a little uncomfortable to kind of like express yourself and get out of your bubble and to shine and to be seen. Okay, so then on June 23rd, the sun in Leo will oppose Pluto retrograde at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So right away, as the sun enters Leo, it will oppose Pluto, which is kind of like what I was saying. A lot of people want to be seen, but then have a fear of being seen. So I've been really studying Leo because I was studying Anthony Bourdain's chart. He is a Leo rising with his sun in Cancer in the 12th. And I have a couple of friends who have a prominent Leo placements. And I have an exalted sun in Aries. And I was thinking about how this stereotype of Leos that they always want attention, they always want people to look at them. And sure, I think there is an aspect of that, like needing validation from people and being seen when you're in the shadow aspects of Leo, because like you need internal validation. But also, I do believe Leos want to be seen versus like seen for how unique they are and how special they are versus needing like attention. And I do think there are Leos that want attention. Like I'm just thinking about J-Lo, right? But there's something about that Leo in its domicile in the sun that wants to shine from an authentic place and people recognizing how special they are. And the opposite sister sign is Aquarius, which is like you're part of a collective. So right away, like the sun will oppose Pluto in Aquarius, which might bring up some shadow aspects of like, are you living in your authenticity? Are you centered in your heart? Are you do you feel seen, or do you just feel like people aren't really like recognizing you for who you are? It's again that like opposition, that full moon energy of um, seeing something very clearly, and it might be some like shadowy material. And, I know indigenous cultures have explored the shadow way before Carl Jung coined the term the shadow. But the shadow are the parts of us that we deem are like bad or unworthy. And so we repress it down. And it really takes these transits to bring that up to the surface so that we can integrate them. I talk about shadow work in my book a lot because it's very important to do that work. Okay, so then on July 25th, the sun at 3 degrees of Leo will sextile Mars and Gemini at 3 degrees. And then on the same day, Mercury will enter Virgo. So July 25th is a very also like sexy energy. It's like being compelled to take some action of some kind, like something tangible, because I'm just thinking about Mercury in the sign of Virgo, which is an earth sign. Um People with Mercury in Virgos take action. They're not necessarily going to be the most verbal people, because people with Mercury in earth signs and water signs aren't as like talkative. They're more silent, they're more in introspective, but their way of expression comes through doing or creating or designing or using their hands. Mercury rules the hands. So the sun in Leo and sextile Mars and Gemini is taking some kind of tangible action step. Again, sextiles are just like opportunities for us to use that energy to take some kind of action that will be well supported. On July 26th, Chiron at 23 degrees of Aries will go retrograde. So I've spoken about Chiron, the mythology, so many times throughout my podcast episodes. I love Chiron as a teacher. Chiron was this okay, so Chiron is the wounded healer because he was not wanted by his parents, but then also had physical wounds of being injured all the time. But he channeled that energy into being a teacher. So his famous students were Hercules and Achilles. So the wound for Aries is not believing in your own power, not believing that you have everything that you need in order to make shit happen for you. So when Chiron goes retrograde, it's just being more introspective and reflective and reviewing of like, where did that come from? Was it a childhood wound? Because Chiron is a asteroid that orbits between Saturn and Uranus. So it's like a intergenerational ancestral asteroid. So is this wound something that came from your parents? Is this wound something that you even, and I'm sure it's not something that you necessarily want to, because it's something that holds you back. So if it's something that holds you back from expressing and acting in a way that is in your power, then you want to use that wound in order for you to show up in the best, most highest vibration of yourself. So, for example, Chiron in Aries is transiting my fifth house of childhood. And so I've been thinking a lot about my childhood and some of the things that I learned and some of the things that I inherited that, are kind of blocking me from where I want to go and what I want to do. So Chiron and Aries is really making me step up and take some risks and really listening to my inner child. And because it's in my fifth house, like play and have joy and pleasure as an active resistance. So just look at your Aries house and see where Chiron is, and really like look into Chiron because, and your own Chiron, because it can show you a lot of your own wounding and how you use that wound to be of service, and can give you hints of your purpose. Like I mentioned in the beginning, Anthony Bourdain and his Chiron's in Aquarius, which is in his seventh house. Like the wound, the pain can be like when you go towards that, it can be the source of your purpose. Like it can give you so much information about why you're here. Okay, last but not least, July 31st, we're going to end on a nice, sweet note. The sun at 8 degrees of Leo will trine the North Node in Aries. Oh my goodness, this is so cute. This is like fated meetings, fated destiny, but more importantly, like of yourself, because again, the sun in its domicile is like all about your spirit. Why did you come here? What makes you shine? I just think about the sun card in the tarot, which is like the happiest card. It speaks about happiness and fulfillment and abundance, and trine to the North Node in Aries. It's like all about self. Aries is about I am. What gives you pleasure? What gives you joy? What is your definition of abundance? What is your idea of success? What is your definition of success? And how do you know you're here? Like, how do you know that you're successful? Because maybe it's not the definition that you thought it was, but it's more of a feeling and a state of being. So, on that note, I'm going to end there because I just think it's so beautiful that we kind of start with this very watery internal realm of Cancer, which is ruled by the moon, a very important luminary. And then we end the month with this sweet aspect of the sun trine the North Node in Aries, the sun being its domicile in the sign of Leo, another important luminary. And next month in August, we will talk about Leo season going into Virgo season and Mercury retrograde. Thank you so much for listening and going on this journey with me. As always, please email me or DM me or tag me in your stories to let me know how the month of July went for you. And make sure to journal and reflect this month. And I send you so much health, wealth, and abundance. I love you so much. Goodbye.